It all began with a seemingly minor incident on a Friday afternoon. My 6-year-old daughter, Lillian, who was in first grade, was dropped off after school by the mother of one of her friends. Since they lived nearby and were driving right past our house, she had called to ask if it was okay to bring Lillian home. I agreed without a second thought. Rather than pulling into the driveway, she stopped the car at the side of the road to let Lillian out. Eager to see me, Lillian hopped out and started running across the street towards our driveway. Following the safety lessons she had learned, she walked out from behind the car. Tragically, she was struck by a driver coming from the opposite direction. In her excitement, she had forgotten to look both ways. I immediately dialed 911, and within minutes, both an ambulance and the police arrived at the scene. My wife of 7 years was working her usual shift at the nursing home. Due to a policy requiring all cell phones to be locked in staff lockers during work hours, I had to call the nursing home to inform them of the situation and ask them to relay the message to her. That's when I found out that, due to an unexpected slowdown in activity, all full-time staff had been asked to use some of their accumulated paid time off to avoid layoffs. My wife had decided to take advantage of this and had taken the day off. However, she had left home in her nurse's uniform that morning, which was highly unusual. Normally, she would discuss any planned time off with me first, and if she did take a day off, she would simply stay at home or help someone in need. When I called the nursing home, the receptionist seemed to cover up the truth with a fabricated story. It was just a little detail, but it stuck with me. I tried calling my wife's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Odd, considering she wasn't at work and would typically answer her phone. Increasingly concerned, I left a detailed message about Lillian's accident. At the hospital, I completed my daughter's paperwork, but still, there was no word from Nora. The emergency doctor had sent Lillian for x-rays and an MRI as she was yet to regain consciousness, and they feared she might be in a coma. My worry intensified. Finally, about an hour after the end of her usual shift, my wife arrived at the hospital. When I hugged her, I noticed the fresh scent of soap on her, a scent I usually associated with her morning showers. Instantly, I felt something was amiss, though I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. These small inconsistencies were piling up, and I knew something was definitely going on, though I had no idea what it could be. I asked Nora, "Didn't the receptionist pass my message on to you?" She responded as soon as she got the chance. "I was tied up with a patient who needed to be transferred to Street Francis, and you were here at Southeast." I knew she was lying, but I decided to let it slide. This wasn't the time or place to confront her. However, it was evident that 2 women had lied to me today, and I needed to understand why. What began as a normal day had spiraled into a series of lies and discrepancies that didn't add up. The one thing I knew for sure was that my wife wasn't acting like her usual self. Just as Lillian's tests were completed, she began to regain consciousness. I was relieved to be there for her as her dad. The doctors decided it would be best for her to stay overnight for observation, given how long she had been unconscious. Around 10 p.m., after she fell asleep, we headed home, picking up food from Taco Bell's drive-thru on the way. After eating and having a cold beer, we went to bed. The following Saturday, our little angel was cleared to come home. Fortunately, there was no serious damage. When we arrived at the hospital, our family doctor, Ethan Robinson, was there examining her. I was impressed by his dedication to his job. Before leaving, he instructed us to schedule a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks, explaining that sometimes issues related to the accident could manifest later. "It's best to be cautious in these situations, especially when they're so young," he advised. Once we were back home and settled, I asked Nora again about her Friday. Her response was unsatisfactory. Normally, she would share something amusing that happened or mention any new transfers from the hospital. Those little bits of usual communication were missing. It was just a small detail, but these small details were forming a troubling pattern. Whatever she had been doing on Friday, it was clear she didn't want me to know about it. This raised a crucial question in my mind. Why? I found myself reflecting on the past few weeks, wondering if I had done something to upset her. Nora could hold a grudge for weeks if she felt wronged, and it seemed like there might be something I was missing. Nora and I had been sweethearts since high school. From the moment I met her in junior high, there was never anyone else for me. We broke up 3 or 4 times over the years, yet we always found our way back to each other. Nora had a knack for getting intrigued by something new and pursuing it, which often led to our temporary breakups. I chalked it up to growing pains, assuming it was a phase she would eventually outgrow. Each breakup stemmed from her budding interest in someone or something else. I was on the Jackson High School football team, and she was a cheerleader. We were both popular, and everyone thought we belonged together, but we ended things our senior year when I felt our relationship was stagnant. After high school, I joined the fire department and steadily worked my way up, while Nora earned her LPN certification and started on the path to becoming a registered nurse. Ironically, we got back together when I was injured on the job fighting a fire. 6 months later, we were married. By the time our daughter was 2, Nora had become a registered nurse. Nora had dark, shoulder-length black hair, blue eyes, and an attractive figure, but it was her generous personality that endeared her to everyone who knew her. What puzzled me was that throughout our marriage, we had never had a serious conflict or problem. In fact, just a few months ago, we were discussing the possibility of expanding our family. On Sunday, we were invited, along with our daughter, to an afternoon barbecue hosted by one of Nora's coworkers. We got ready by donning our bathing suits under our regular clothes. Each guest was assigned something to bring, so on the way, I stopped at the grocery store to pick up premium franks and buns. These were not just any hot dogs. They were Smokies with natural casings that I always boiled before grilling. Boiling them added a richness and bulkiness that grilling straight from the package couldn't achieve. It made them moist and infused with a smoky flavor in every bite. I had stumbled upon this cooking method by accident, and it had become my trademark. During the barbecue, I went unnoticed in the kitchen as I boiled the franks in salted water. I kept a close eye on them until they puffed up, which didn't take long. After draining the water, I dried them off before taking them to the grill. The way I prepared them made them a hit, and we always ended up with more meat than bread because of their popularity. My wife Nora was chatting with our host, Grace, just outside the patio doors. Grace was the head of the Human Resources Department where they both worked. They were both looking out toward the pool where our daughter and Grace's son were playing with a few other kids. I wasn't paying much attention to their conversation until I heard something that struck me deeply, shaking my foundation. Their words made everything painfully clear. Dr. Ethan Robinson, the wildly popular single doctor, used to come every Friday afternoon to check up on his patients and residents, Grace said. Now he shows up only on the Fridays you're working. Some of us are starting to wonder if there's something going on between you two. Is there something I should be aware of? No, not really, Nora replied, looking notably flushed, as if she didn't want to discuss the topic. I recognized that look. It usually meant she had been caught doing something she didn't want to explain. Suddenly, I realized that two people's routines had significantly changed on Fridays. Nora had a good reason for keeping this secret, something highly uncharacteristic for her. We're just professional friends, Nora tried to explain to Grace, but her words lacked conviction. He likes the detailed reports I send him on his Alzheimer's patients' behavior patterns. He says it helps him better address their medical needs. Well, that's not what's being spread in the halls, Grace countered. Whatever is going on between the two of you needs to be toned down at work, or the rumors are going to get much worse. I'll be sure to mention that to him next time I see him. I have another scheduled doctor's appointment with him next week, Nora said. I guess I should go check on Lillian. I watched Nora walk away to check on our daughter in the pool. She's lying. She doesn't have a doctor's appointment next week. Grace turned and saw the look of shock on my face. Her expression turned pale because she realized, as I did at that moment, that something was definitely going on and that I had been completely unaware until now. You overheard us, didn't you, Justin? Grace asked. I nodded. Do you think something's going on between them? Over the last few days, a few things haven't added up. Now, with what I just saw and heard, it's painting a very different picture. Her reactions made it clear she's hiding something she doesn't want anyone to know about. It's forced me to reevaluate everything. Can you tell me how long Nora has been taking off every other Friday? For the last 3 months, Grace explained. She suggested the arrangement since she works a lot of extra hours. Most of her overtime gets eaten up by additional taxes, she said. She takes the day off to reduce her overtime hours and saves her permanent time off for family events. We in HR like it because it saves the corporation money and gives part-timers more hours. I have another question. How close are Nora and the receptionist who answers the phone? I asked. They're best friends. Why? Grace replied. On Friday, when I called about Lillian's accident, the receptionist told me Nora was taking an accumulated permanent time off day because management had requested it to prevent laying off part-time staff. You were lied to. We're operating at full capacity. We have no room for anyone else. What are you going to do? Grace asked, pouring me a strong drink. Nora is definitely hiding something, and it looks like her best friend is helping her. I sure hope my suspicions are wrong, I said. Dr. Robinson is our family doctor. If my gut feeling is right, I'll destroy his career, divorce Nora, and go for sole custody of our daughter. According to the gossip, you're not the only one who thinks something's up, Grace said. Nurses feel they're too friendly for a mere professional relationship. They seem to spend a lot of time in a patient's room with the door closed. If I hear anything else, I'll let you know. Please do. As a fireman, we always say that where there's smoke, there's fire. It might just be a mutual attraction going too far, but either way, I'm going to find out, I said while drying off the smokies. Nice try, but I don't think it's going to work, Grace said. I've been there, and when our gut tells us something, it's usually right. At that moment, I began to believe I was seeing the same behavior patterns from Nora that I'd experienced with her in high school. If that was true, it meant one thing. Nora's eyes had found another. Dr. Ethan Robinson joined our family practice partnership group just over 3 years ago, taking over from our former physician. The local hospital, due to his age, had made things difficult for him, and his partners essentially forced his retirement. Nora, my wife, is a registered nurse who obtained her license while working at Southeast Hospital before she transitioned to the nursing home. Southeast Hospital, being a training hospital, wanted a more youthful image. When our previous family doctor refused to self-medicate or diet to fit that image, they pushed him out. It's disheartening when medical organizations prioritize appearance over experience and expertise. For the next 6 weeks, I'd be on an evening schedule, working from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 days on, 4 days off. It was clear I needed some help. If something was indeed going on, my work schedule gave them the perfect opportunity to hide their actions. Nora's suspicious behavior had seeded enough doubt in me that I made a move I never thought I'd have to. Before taking the sausages to the grill, I texted a colleague from my crew, asking him to call me in 5 minutes. I stood near Nora when my phone rang. Before answering, I told her it was a work-related call and that I needed to step out front for privacy. After picking up, I asked my colleague to hold on and walked away from the backyard. The truth was, I didn't want Nora to overhear the conversation. Brian, remember the team we assembled a couple of years ago to find out what was going on with William's ex-wife? I asked. Of course, Justin. It worked really well and didn't take long. Who needs our help this time? I do. From what I've gathered, this has been going on for at least 3 months. I suspect Nora is involved with Dr. Ethan Robinson. Even her colleagues at the nursing home think something's up. I know because I overheard one of the management staff talking to her about it. For it to be mentioned at work, it must be serious. The head of human resources told Nora to tone down her interactions with him at work. Brian understood the gravity of the situation. All right, we'll get the team together and find out what's really going on, he said. Thank you, I replied, hanging up. As I walked back to the grill, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change in ways I never imagined. Ouch, if that's true, it sounds like this has been going on for quite a while, Brian remarked. I'll start making calls to arrange for us to meet at the fire hall tomorrow when we're on shift. Our friends in the sheriff's department will be glad to have something different to work on. Remember, Justin, we'll need to enforce the same rules with you that we did with William. When we developed the plan to help William, we established one crucial rule. He had to stay out of it until the team was finished. We believed that any changes in his behavior could prompt his spouse to alter her actions. It took less than a month to gather the evidence we needed. By the end, we presented William with a detailed account of his now former wife's activities, leaving no room for doubt. William's lawyer was so impressed with the evidence that he described it as airtight. As a result, William won his divorce case handily, gaining primary custody of their 3 kids. That Monday night, just after supper, we convened in the meeting room at the fire hall. Present were 6 sheriff's department members, 5 firefighters, and 2 police officers. I narrated everything that had transpired on Friday and shared what I had learned since then. Everyone agreed that something suspicious was definitely going on. I provided the description of my wife's car, her license plate number, and her regular work hours. She worked from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., 8 hours a day. They requested copies of our medical records from the past 2 years stored at home to verify that Dr. Ethan Robinson was still our family doctor through the medical billing records. If he and Nora were romantically involved, he shouldn't have reassigned us to another doctor within their limited partnership practice. After that, I was asked to leave the room so they could plan who would handle what and when. On Tuesday morning, after seeing my daughter off at the bus stop, I noticed my retired neighbor grabbing his morning newspaper. I walked over to say hello. During our conversation, he asked why the doctor had visited last night. "Are you sure it was a doctor?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "He was still wearing his white coat when he got out of his car. I saw him take it off and leave it in the car before he went to your door. Your wife had the front door open and was waiting for him. He was still there when I went to bed around 10, he added. "I hope it's not anything serious." I responded, "I don't know why he was here, but I'll ask my wife about it when she gets home." As I walked back to my house, it hit me that my worst fears were coming true. Grabbing my cell phone, I returned to my neighbor and showed him a picture of Dr. Ethan Robinson from the medical group's Facebook page. He confirmed that this was the doctor he had seen. Later, Nora called to say she'd be late. I ended up taking our daughter, Lillian, to my mother's place so I could get to work on time. I informed Brian about what my neighbor had said while handing over copies of our medical records and health insurance reports. These documents confirmed that Dr. Ethan Robinson was still our family doctor, with my wife's last appointment with him just 2 weeks ago. The following Tuesday, a few of the guys from the team came by the house while Nora was at work to install some surveillance equipment. I had to stay outside, so I chatted with my next-door neighbor. "The doctor's visit last week wasn't medical, was it?" he asked. "You're a sharp man," I replied. He then observed, "Your friends are wiring the house, aren't they?" I nodded and said, "Yes, but they're doing it without me." This was deliberate so I wouldn't know the exact locations of the equipment. If I did, I might subconsciously alter my behavior, which could tip off Nora. "I wish I had friends like yours when I got my divorce years ago," my neighbor said. "It might have saved me thousands in legal fees. These days, you have to protect yourself even from those you trust. It's sad that the computer age has eroded the little family values we had left." On the first day of our last 4-day run to finish the 6 weeks of night shifts, they came into the firehouse to deliver the bad news. They even brought along one of the best divorce lawyers in town. I knew then that my situation was graver than just a spouse's infidelity. The fact that they picked a lawyer for me indicated we needed to act quickly. It turned out that Nora and Dr. Ethan Robinson were lovers, and the affair had been going on for over 6 months. Things were reaching a breaking point, and they believed it was time for bold moves. Nora was planning to file for divorce at the end of the school year, just 2 months away. On nights I was working, Nora and Ethan would either meet at our house after Lillian was in bed, or Nora would take Lillian to her sister's so she could babysit. After spending the night with Ethan at his place, Nora would pick up Lillian in the morning and bring her home before I got off work. They would then prepare for the day as usual. The lawyer's presence was necessitated by the deceitful plans being concocted behind my back. With Dr. Ethan Robinson's assistance, Nora intended to accuse me of mental cruelty. They aimed to prove that I was an unfit father and a danger to our daughter's well-being. Nora believed that with her professional status and the fabricated charges supported by a falsified medical history, she could win sole custody of Lillian. She wanted to limit my contact with our daughter to supervised visits only. Her ultimate goal was to infuriate me and my parents to the point where we would simply walk away from their lives forever. As I listened, I couldn't help but wonder what I had done to deserve such venomous and vindictive behavior from my soon-to-be ex-wife. The report was comprehensive and damning. It spanned 60 pages, including explosive and explicit photographs of Nora and Ethan in intimate acts. There were numerous notarized statements confirming that the affair had been ongoing for at least 6 months, and transcripts of their conversations detailing their plans to ruin me. The most incriminating evidence was a graphic picture of our 6-year-old daughter standing at the foot of our master bed, watching them make out, both completely naked and oblivious to her presence. I decided to have Nora served with divorce papers after my last night shift later this week. Additionally, we plan to file a complaint with the state medical board against Dr. Ethan Robinson on the same day. We would include evidence showing that, according to our billing records, he was still acting as our family doctor during this period. We would question whether he had been falsifying my and my wife's medical records to bolster her false claims of mental cruelty. It was confirmed and documented with an image that he was engaging in intimate acts with my wife in front of my 6-year-old daughter. Dr. Ethan Robinson, once a respected medical professional, had violated his own ethical standards and, by falsifying medical records, had broken the law. A copy of the divorce petition was to be shared with our local child services, explaining that I was taking my daughter out of town to facilitate their investigation into my wife and me without interference. The accompanying letter clarified that this was a preventive measure. The state's child services take potential crimes against children by family members very seriously. Each letter would include an 8x10 photograph of my daughter witnessing the inappropriate behavior. I plan to start a 3-week vacation immediately after my work shifts ended this week. The time off had already been approved. One of the department heads in our fire team, a close colleague, suggested I take my daughter out of town. In their presence, I called my retired parents and proposed using my dad's RV for a 3-week trip starting the day I finished my last shift. I assured them I would cover any expenses, and although they were curious about the urgency, I promised to explain en route. My newly hired lawyer was initially shocked when I suggested signing over my parental rights temporarily to my parents until the divorce was finalized. However, he agreed it was a brilliant move under the circumstances, demonstrating my primary concern for my child's well-being. If Nora had already filed a complaint with child services, it would show that I was prioritizing Lillian's needs. My lawyer assured me he would prepare the necessary paperwork, which would need to be notarized within 24 hours of serving my wife. After finishing my last evening shift, I returned home just in time to see my wife off to work. She gave me her customary kiss on the cheek before leaving. Once she drove away, I quickly made a phone call. Lillian and I started packing for the surprise trip. At my request, a sheriff's department representative would inform the school principal about the situation and why I had to pull my daughter out of school. My parents arrived at 8 o'clock that morning. We loaded our belongings into the RV and hit the road by 9. Out of respect, I called Grace to inform her about the unfolding events. She assured me that since their conversation, everything between her and Nora at the nursing home had remained strictly professional, and the rumors had gradually died down. I explained that I now had evidence proving the affair had been ongoing for at least 6 months, and that Nora would be served at work that day. Grace agreed to witness it and keep me posted. Then I joined my daughter in my parents' spacious RV, ready for our trip. As we left town, I handed my mother a legal envelope containing all the details and asked her to read through it. My dad glanced over and asked, "Okay, what's going on?" "I've recently learned that Nora was planning to divorce me at the end of the school year," I began. "What Mom is reading includes everything a group of us have uncovered and proven. Her lover is our family doctor, and they were setting things up to make me look really bad. If they hadn't been caught, I likely would never have been able to see Lillian again by the time we got through court." "So, We're getting out of town because things are about to get very explosive for a few people in the next few days, my dad interjected. It's best if you and our granddaughter aren't around. Nora will be served while she's at work today. This morning, the state medical board will receive an official complaint about Dr. Ethan's relationship with the patient, my wife. I'm filing charges for possible ethics violations, including a very damning photograph. Child Services will also be notified about everything that's happening, along with what Mom is reading, I explained. He'll lose his license to practice for at least a year or more if he's found guilty. His conduct will bring deep scrutiny on every doctor in his practice group if your claims are validated, Dad mused. Oh my God, Mom gasped. They allowed my granddaughter to witness their actions. I'll deal with them myself. That doctor can kiss his career goodbye. He's lost his license for good. Every government agency will be tearing through his partnership with a fine-tooth comb, Dad said. They've hung themselves. Nora will be lucky to get supervised visits. Justin Carter, you and Lillian will be moving in with us when we return, Mom declared. If Nora shows up at my door when you and your father aren't home, I'll answer with a loaded double-barrel shotgun. No more school bus. I'll drive Lillian to and from school every day. God, I loved my mom. She adored her only granddaughter more than anything and fiercely protected her family. Growing up, she took on anyone she felt threatened us. Dad drove until the gas tank was down to half. At the gas station, I used my credit card to fill up, and then took over the driving, giving Dad a chance to read everything for himself. He couldn't believe the level of detail. I explained about the group we had formed within the city services. This was the second divorce case we had handled to protect one of our own. Around 3 o'clock, we pulled into a trailer park my mom had booked. She had planned these 3 weeks to spoil her granddaughter rotten. Once we parked and hooked up to the electrical supply, I took Lillian swimming in the park's pond. Upon returning, my cell phone rang. It was Grace. Hi, Grace, I said. I hope your day went okay. Justin, we haven't had a day this exciting in months, Grace responded. Thanks to you, we got word this afternoon that Dr. Ethan Robinson has been temporarily suspended from practicing until the state medical board completes their investigation. I'm genuinely impressed they moved that fast, I admitted. I figure he'd at least be called in for an interview first. They only issue suspensions like that when there's a major complaint with some substantial proof already provided, Grace explained. It also suggests they consider the situation very serious. It could take about 3 months before we hear an outcome. Well, I did send them all the information included in my divorce petition, I said. At 3 p.m., your soon-to-be ex got served, right at shift change, Grace continued. I had informed security to expect the server and contact me before letting him in. When he arrived, I escorted him to the section where Nora was working. The server asked, "Are you Nora Carter?" And when she said yes, he replied, "Congratulations, you've been served." When she opened the envelope, the first thing we all saw was the image of Ethan and her making love while Lillian watched. She screamed, "Oh no," and then fainted. Dan, my lawyer, ensured she saw that first, I said with a laugh. Serves her right. Did the state get a copy of that picture? Grace asked. Most likely in the same manner, if I know my lawyer, I said honestly. Then the state really had no choice. Dr. Ethan Robinson was having an affair with a patient and allowed her minor child to witness it, Grace said. I didn't believe you could pull it off. We now have an office pool on how long he'll lose his license. My dad thinks he's lost it for good, at least within our state, I replied. We discovered that Nora and Ethan were fabricating a false medical history, claiming I was mentally cruel to her and our daughter, aiming for her to win sole custody. If that can be proven, criminal charges are likely to follow. It's a mess, and her problems are only getting worse now that everyone knows she allowed her daughter to see what she was doing with Ethan, Grace said. The rumor mill is running crazy here. Some of the staff are refusing to work with her, and I'm reworking the schedule as we speak. They say they've lost all trust in her. When she finally regained her composure, I informed her that the state had notified us of Dr. Ethan Robinson's suspension by the medical board pending investigation. She left at 3:30, and she was definitely not a happy person. Wait till she finds out Lillian and I are out of town, I said. We left with my parents this morning under my lawyer's advice. Given the accusations Ethan and Nora are making against me, my lawyer thought it was best if I'm not alone with my daughter for the time being. Smart move, Grace said. Given her profession, she has a lot of friends in various places. To lend credibility to her claims, those stories might already be circulating. The detailed reports we've kept have saved our organization's legal standing more than once. We promised to keep in touch and then said our goodbyes. My mom and dad looked at me in complete awe, as if they were fully grasping for the first time just what Nora and Dr. Robinson were attempting. Mom, find the address of the closest notary in your notebook for us tomorrow morning, I said. Why? She asked. The lawyer has drawn up legal documents giving you both my parental rights until either the divorce is settled or my name is cleared. We need to have them signed and notarized before 3 p.m. tomorrow, I explained. I won't let them take my daughter from us, no matter what. With tears in her eyes, my mother asked, Are you sure about this? It seems a bit extreme. Yes, Mom, I am. Even the lawyer feels it's for the best. We don't know what's written in the false medical reports. Until it's proven that I'm not a danger to my own child, we're doing this for Lillian's protection, I explained. My mother's tears began to flow. Meanwhile, Nora Carter arrived home to find her husband's car in the driveway. Bracing herself for the storm she expected, she shut off her car and walked to the door. She rang the doorbell, assuming he would answer, but he didn't. She rang it again. Finally, she took out her house key and unlocked the door. As soon as she entered the house, she realized no one was home because her daughter hadn't run to greet her. She pulled a legal envelope out of her large bag and began reading it thoroughly. It was clear that whoever Justin had hired had caught everything. The document contained both Ethan's and her own transcribed words, laying out their entire plan. Justin had struck first and struck hard. The problem for her and Ethan was that the altered medical records hadn't been released yet. They hadn't reached that stage in their scheme. Now they wouldn't be. Ethan couldn't access his files until the investigation was complete, and he hadn't yet heard the details of the complaint against him, just that preventive measures were being taken due to the seriousness of the allegations. Justin had proven the affair and their reckless behavior. No one with any morals or principles would condone the fact that a 6-year-old had witnessed them making love. Until now, she had no idea it had happened. Lillian must have woken up and then gone right back to bed. Getting sole custody was now an impossibility. But joint custody with primary might still be within reach. The key was getting to Justin and talking to him. She believed Justin would always listen to reason. She called him, but her call went straight to voicemail. She texted him, but got no response. She called his parents only to find they weren't answering their home phone. She tried their cell phones, but didn't even reach their answering service. It became clear she had been blocked by them. She called her sister, who answered. Hi, Nora. Justin was smart. He sent a copy of his petition for divorce to the entire family, Aria said. Mom and Dad are furious. They read the whole thing and are totally disgusted by you and your lover's conduct. You went too far in our parents' eyes by trying to destroy Justin's reputation, Aria continued. He called them this morning, just after you left for work, to let them know he was taking their granddaughter out of town with his parents. When they asked him why, he responded, Your daughter and her lover have left me no choice. You will receive a document that will explain why. Dad, Justin said I have been forced by Nora into a legal situation where I must sign over my parental rights for Lillian until I can clear my name. My mom and dad will be assuming that responsibility. Our parents went into hysterics when they read the documents. Why in the world would you try to destroy a man's life? Damn it, Nora muttered. Does this mean I'll have to fight my in-laws for custody? Looks like it, Aria responded. Divorce court can't rule on what he no longer possesses. I think he outsmarted you. I always told you he was the kindest, most giving man until he was crossed. Then his approach was scorched earth. You know your mother-in-law's reputation. That's one battle that's going to drag on for a long time. I expected a fight, but I didn't see this coming, Nora admitted. I thought I had a winning hand. We all received what you did, Aria explained. A cover letter stated this is a certified copy of the petition for divorce. A certified copy was also sent to the state medical board. You and Ethan were trying to destroy Justin so you could write him out of Lillian's life. If you were in his shoes, what would you do? Damn, Nora exclaimed. He's going after my boyfriend's career and our future. If the board rules in Justin's favor, Ethan may never practice medicine in this state again. Bingo, Aria said. He's using your own schemes against you. Remember, you always said Ethan's the best role in the hay. As far as the family's concerned, we're done. You're on your own. None of us want any part of your attempt to ruin Justin's life. Stay away from us until this mess is sorted out. Nora was stunned. Her husband had completely outmaneuvered her, and even her family wanted nothing to do with the mess she created. She'd been totally shocked when she got served. She and Ethan thought they'd been so careful. She spent the rest of the night trying to figure out where they'd gone wrong. Meanwhile, Ethan Robinson was just leaving a heated 4-hour meeting with his partners. They had all agreed to buy him out effective immediately to minimize the fallout on their limited partnership. Until they knew who had made the serious charges, everyone was flying blind. Ethan's buyout was substantial enough for him to open his own office once things settled down. Nora's cell phone buzzed with a new text message. She swiped to open it. The message was from Justin. Unable to talk, too much rage. Any communication will be done in the presence of or through lawyers. Tears welled up in Nora's eyes. She knew she lost the chance to persuade him to withdraw his complaint against Ethan. My parents and I had just left the notary's office after finalizing the transfer of my parental rights to them. It cost me an extra $5 to have a copy scanned and sent to my lawyer. Just then, I got an unexpected call from our family doctor's office. When I answered, the nurse informed me that the state had obtained a court order for medical records, but had failed to include my name. She needed my approval to release the records. I gave my consent and asked if they were also obtaining my wife's and my billing records. She confirmed that they were collecting everything related to our family. My mother had meticulously planned our trip, with daily activities lined up for Lillian's enjoyment. It brought back fond memories of my own childhood. We parked early again today. The humidity was manageable, so I was outside with Dad, grilling supper. Mom poked her head out and said, "Grace is on your cell." I took the phone from her. "Hi, Grace," I greeted. "I'm a bit surprised to hear from you so soon." "Well, it's been another exciting day, thanks to you," Grace replied, a hint of laughter in her voice. State officials interviewed Nora this afternoon for about an hour. They used our on-staff notary to record, witness, and verify her statement. "That's really interesting," I said. "Is there anything else I should be aware of?" When the meeting ended, Nora told me she would have to appear before the nursing board for a full review due to her conduct, Grace explained. She'll likely end up on 6 months probation. "How will that affect her work situation?" I asked. "Since the misconduct didn't occur at this location, not much," Grace replied. "I'll have to monitor her and report anything questionable. For the next 6 months, Nora will produce the best daily reports on our patients in the entire organization. But if she does get probation, she'll be stuck on the graveyard shift for its duration." I couldn't help but laugh. Nora hated graveyard shifts because they killed any semblance of a social life. I explained to Grace that my parents and I were trying to make this time special for Lillian. We chatted for a few more minutes, and I promised to take her out for dinner when I returned. During supper, my mother asked what I knew about Grace. I said, "Not much. She's a single mother around my age with a son about a year older than Lillian. I don't even know if she was ever married." Grace and I stayed in touch for the duration of our trip. The day before we headed back, I called my lawyer to arrange access to my home to gather my belongings. That's when I found out Nora had already moved out, taking what she wanted, and was now living full-time with Ethan. We decided to return a couple of days early to take care of some pressing matters, and on Friday morning, we slipped back into Cape. When I informed my parents, they found it amusing. They dropped me off at the house early that morning and took little Lillian to our new home. The first thing I did was mow the lawn. Before I finished, my neighbor came over with a cold beer and said, "Well played. Your marriage breakup even made the local news." I then called a locksmith to rekey all the locks. I spent the day cleaning up the mess Nora had left behind. I called Mom to see if she needed anything from the house. She said no, just to bring the rest of mine and Lillian's clothes. I decided that whatever was left would be sold with the house. I packed up any canned goods and frozen food and dropped them off at the food bank, then returned to clean out the fridge. When I brought the clothes home, Mom insisted I leave them in her laundry room. She wanted to wash everything before we used them, just in case. Around 4 p.m., I picked up my phone and called Grace. She answered on the first ring. "Hi, Justin, you're back," Grace said. "When did you get in?" "This morning. I spent the day cleaning up the house to get ready to put on the market," I replied. "I was wondering if you and your son wanted to join Lillian and me for supper." "If he was home, we would love to, but he's with my mother for the weekend. I'm free, though," Grace said. "Okay then, I'll leave Lillian with my mom and pick you up at 7. Do you prefer Outback or Red Lobster?" "Red Lobster sounds great," she replied. I dressed up a bit for our dinner, wearing a nice dress shirt, dress pants, and slip-on leather shoes. Since I had made a reservation, we were seated right away. We had a delightful meal, during which I learned a lot about Grace. She had never married and was raising her 7-year-old son on her own. Her father had been a fireman back in the day. My first day back at work was set for Sunday. No decision had yet been made by the state regarding Nora and Ethan, and the general consensus was that the longer it took, the worse their outcome might be. I shared with Grace how Lillian and I had spent our 3 weeks away as a family. After dinner, we took a walk through downtown Cape to explore the nightlife. It was around 11 when I finally pulled into my parents' place, where Mom, being her usual self, was still waiting up for me. On Sunday afternoon at work, I was called into the office to meet a visitor. I had a feeling I knew who it was, and I was right. It was my soon-to-be ex, Nora Carter. "Mrs. Robinson, what can I do for you?" I asked as I entered the office, discreetly turning on the voice recorder app on my cell phone. "My name's still Carter, Justin," Nora responded. "Well, if that's true, then I'm still nothing but a piece of shit to you," I replied. "So, what do you want?" "Justin, that's not true," Nora said, trying to diffuse the tension. "Sorry, but that's not what your actions have shown," I countered. "You moved in with someone else the day after Lillian and I left for our vacation. So much for guilt or remorse." "I want to see Lillian," Nora said. "Check with your lawyer. He can verify that I legally have no say in that anymore." "You're knocking on the wrong door," I replied. "After all, you publicly accused me of abusing our child." "I know that, but you can smooth the way," Nora insisted. "I'm sorry, but I don't think Lillian should be socializing with someone who has acted as you have," I said. "Photographs show just how much you care about her when you're in the arms of another. You can deal with my parents directly. Now please leave, Mrs. Robinson, and don't come back, or I will pursue a restraining order." With that, I turned away and walked out, instructing the man assigned to the position for the day to escort her out. I turned off the app and saved the recording. He later told me that her face went white, and she broke down as he escorted her to her car. He said he told her that based on what he had heard, I had no choice but to behave that way. He reminded her that if she had felt any responsibility over the past 4 weeks, she would have taken steps to clear my name. Many of us who assisted in the investigation of what was happening consider your conduct unforgivable. You're just a conniving, greedy individual who planned to take away everything that meant anything to him. Late Monday afternoon, while working with first responders on a medical call, my mother called. I let the call go to voicemail as we were helping get an elderly lady ready for transport to the hospital. Once I got back to the station, I returned her call. "Sorry, Mom, I was out on a call and couldn't answer," I explained. "I figured that," she said. "I thought you should know the state was here just after I brought Lillian home. They spoke to her directly at school today. They toured the home, inspected her room, and discussed the transfer of parental rights with me. I told them I'd never seen you be abusive to anyone." "Thanks, Mom. That's good to hear," I replied. I hope you're not mad, but Nora's parents are here and staying for dinner, she added. Do you want us to wait for you? That's fine, Mom. Please give them my love and tell them I'll be there as soon as I can, I said. Let them know they can have Lillian whenever they want, as long as Nora isn't present. Explain that it has to be this way until the court has settled everything. I ended up staying late because one of the men on the evening shift couldn't make it until 8, so I stayed to ensure we weren't short-staffed. I told him he could make up the hours to me later. I texted my mother not to wait for me and explained why. I was just getting into my Ford Escape, ready to head home, when I received a phone call from Nora's dad. Hi, Dad. How was dinner? I asked. Great. Both my wife and I enjoyed it, he said. Justin, my wife, and I want to thank you. Isabella told us what you shared. We're so sorry for what our daughter has done. We promise to respect your terms. Have you talked to her at all? We haven't since we got the copy of the divorce petition. She came by the station on Sunday, demanding to see Lillian. I told her that was out of my hands, and she would have to deal with my mother about that. Actually, I just remembered I recorded our conversation. How about I text it to you? I offered. Please do. I'd like to hear it, he replied. So I did. I guess it went over well because he forwarded it to my parents, all of his children, including Nora, and then sent back a text saying, the truth was explained well. Living in Flavor Country has its quirks. I learned the next day that Nora and I were scheduled to see Judge Paul Allen on Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock. He's known as the hardest, most principled judge the area has ever seen. You had the right to be a bigot or an asshole in his court, but if you were, he'd treat you accordingly. Bottom line, if you were male, it meant your dignity was at serious risk. It was rumored, though never proved, that some never recovered from his rulings. The man was a living legend here, often said to make Judge Roy Bean look like a pushover. My lawyer said that when the judge is done with our case, it'll make Friday the 13th look like a comedy. You had to mind your P's and Q's and be ready to respond to his questions on the spot or face the consequences. The judge does not tolerate slander or innuendos. He wants the facts. With that in mind, we prepared our defense. We were all there promptly at 1 o'clock as the judge took the bench. Nora's lawyer sought visitation rights for her to see Lillian, which required overturning my surrender of parental rights. My lawyer pointed out that I had voluntarily signed my parental rights over to my parents due to accusations made by my wife and her lover. The matter was still under investigation by the State Medical Board and Child Services. The question of whether I had been abusive and mentally cruel to my daughter Lillian had yet to be resolved. Until addressed by the legal systems designated by the state, any time Mr. Justin Carter spends alone with his daughter could be considered a risk of potential child endangerment. Justin Carter swallowed his pride and prioritized his daughter Lillian's well-being. He has not been alone with her since becoming aware of the charges brought against him due to the situation his wife created. We have a recorded conversation, witnessed and supported by a notarized statement, in which Justin explained that Nora Carter would have to address visitation with the current custodians, his parents. The judge requested to hear the conversation, so my lawyer played it through the courtroom sound system. The recording was clearly audible to all, and Nora visibly cringed hearing it again. Then my lawyer presented a notarized statement from the witness detailing the events following my departure. The judge asked to see the transfer of parental rights, and my lawyer handed him a copy. A slight smile escaped the judge's lips as he read it. Turning toward my wife's lawyer, he spoke, "Is it true that, due to his soon-to-be ex-wife's accusations of mental cruelty and emotional abuse, Mr. Justin Carter felt compelled to take these actions?" My wife's lawyer responded, "Yes, but she was under a lot of emotional pressure at that time. Now that she's out of the relationship, she has regained her balance." The judge asked, "Is this matter being investigated as it has been described to me?" "Yes, it is, and no ruling or resolution has been made yet," my wife's lawyer stated. The judge continued, "I'm going to read what the parental rights surrender document states. It declares I voluntarily sign over my parental rights until the issues raised about my parenting skills have been resolved by the government agencies investigating them, or until the court rules upon proof that I am not an abuser of any kind. Currently, there are 2 agencies involved, correct? There are actually 3: the State Medical Board, Child Services, and the State Nursing Board, my lawyer clarified. Brilliant. This is just one big mess. How long have these investigations been ongoing? Judge Allen inquired. About a month, my lawyer replied. The judge remarked, "It appears that this is more than just a typical she said issue. Is that correct?" On page 32, the second and third paragraphs of Justin Carter's divorce petition provide an explanation as to why the 3 boards are still investigating, my lawyer said. We watched as the judge retrieved the document and read it, his expression growing serious. He set the paperwork down and looked at my wife's lawyer. Let me make it clear. The divorce cannot be granted until all 3 investigations have concluded. I will not interfere with investigations that may result in criminal charges. From what I've read, it appears that one party is here because of the potential criminal actions of the other. I must take that possibility into account. It may be that the complaints made by one party against the other are unfounded, Judge Paul Allen stated. The signing away of Mr. Justin Carter's parental rights stands. I want to acknowledge the wisdom he has shown by his actions. It takes a special kind of parent to prioritize the needs of their child. What he has done is for both the protection of the child and himself. The conduct of both biological parents towards their child is in question due to the actions of one. He thought it best to remove himself from the equation. Therefore, I must agree that until we receive reports from the state, no final decisions can be made. Mrs. Nora Carter's suit for visitation must be directed at the child's other legal guardian, which is not him. Court is dismissed, the judge concluded. The look on Nora's face said it all. She was clearly unhappy that my actions had been declared legal. Nora, who hated to lose, was visibly enraged. As we were leaving the courtroom, she approached me. "Justin, how did you figure it out?" Nora asked. It was a bunch of little things that didn't add up, from the time of Lillian's accident to the barbecue at Grace's. Remember the phone call I got that Sunday? I replied. Guess why? She asked. Just before that, I noticed your behavior was similar to how you acted in high school when you got interested in someone else, I said. That phone call was a response to a text I had sent a few minutes earlier. By the time it ended, you were already under investigation. Her face turned ghostly pale. It hadn't occurred to her that her own actions had given her away. She had assumed someone else had tipped me off. If you pay attention to the little things, they eventually reveal the whole story, I added with a smile. Given your attention to detail with your patients, you should have known that. I didn't need to say it, but I enjoyed getting in that dig. It made her even angrier, especially since I had the biggest grin on my face. After leaving the courtroom, I slipped into the men's washroom and ran into the judge. I thanked him for his ruling. It was my pleasure, Judge Allen said. It was quite clear once I reviewed the facts. One question, was it your lawyer who suggested you do that? No, it was my idea, I said. Knowing my wife as well as I do, I realized she would do or say anything to worsen my situation. I saw myself being put in a box she thought she could control. A friend told me that, given her profession, she knew a lot of influential people who could affect the outcome. I did what I had to in order to take myself out of it. If you hadn't, she would have gotten not just visitation but custodial custody as well, given the seriousness of her charges against you, the judge said candidly. Your preemptive strike put an end to all that. I hope your name is cleared soon. So do I agreed. Saturday night at the fairgrounds, they held a Back to the 60s dance in one of the display buildings. I had picked up a pair of tickets and called Grace to ask if she'd like to join me. She said she'd love to, but she was having dinner with her parents first and invited me and Lillian to come along. I agreed. It had been a while since I had received the once-over from an overprotective father, which was interesting. Lillian and Grace's son, Andrew, were getting along well. Grace's father, however, came across as a bit of a jerk. Apparently, Grace noticed because I overheard her telling him to back off. I know Justin's a good, honest man, she said. How in the hell do you know what kind of man he is? He roared back. His ex-wife has accused him of all sorts of things. Everyone is whispering about it behind his back. Dad, Grace replied. He works out of station number 3. He paused for a moment, then smiled and said, well, shit, why didn't you tell me that? Extending his hand humbly, he continued, it takes a certain type of man to be a fireman. Now I know the stories about you are all bullshit. You're always welcome here. They offered to keep Lillian for the night, but I explained she was due at the in-laws for the rest of the weekend. This led to me having to explain the whole situation. The dance was a blast. There's nothing more enjoyable than dancing to the oldies like Twist and Shout, all the Beach Boys songs, and early rock and roll. Some doo-wop songs were Grace's favorites because her mother used to play them as she grew up. I escorted Grace to her door. As we were saying goodnight, she leaned in and kissed me. Justin, I know it's too early, but I'm interested when you're ready, she said before saying goodnight. It was just after 2 in the morning when I walked into my parents' home. Once again, my mother was waiting. We talked about the night and how much I enjoyed it before I headed off to bed. The lawyers worked out the asset division, and we put the house up for sale. Things were moving ahead slowly. 3 months after the separation, there was finally a breakthrough. The state medical board found Dr. Ethan Robinson guilty of several violations of their ethics code, primarily altering medical records for his own personal benefit. His attempt to destroy a man's life to take that man's wife was taken very seriously, and his license to practice medicine in the state was permanently revoked. Grace called with the news, waking me from a deep sleep. I was back on night shifts and had only gotten about 2 hours of rest, so I was wide awake and too excited to go back to sleep. My mother was thrilled when I shared the news with her and Dad. Seeing me dressed up, she asked, "What's up?" I replied, "I'm going to see if the lady who stood by me these last few months would like to go for lunch." My mom smiled and said, "Don't you think it's time we met Grace?" Around noon, I walked into the Chateau nursing home in Cape, dressed semi-formally. The first person I saw was the receptionist who had lied to me a few months ago. Her face went white as I approached her counter just inside the main entrance. "Would you contact Grace Davis and inform her there's a gentleman here who would like to know if she is available to go for lunch?" I asked. I watched her pick up the phone and call Grace's extension. A few minutes later, Grace appeared with a huge smile. After greeting her, I pulled her into my arms and gave her a full frontal kiss. Then, hand in hand, we went out to Logan's Roadhouse for lunch. "You know we are now the main center of attention for the gossip mills," Grace said. "Nora has already found out from the queen of gossip, the receptionist. That's her problem. Now that I have been cleared, I'm not looking back," I replied. "Besides, my new girlfriend may be getting tired of waiting for me to get off my ass." I must have said something right because Grace's eyes got a little watery. Her 1-hour lunch turned into 2.5. Later, I learned that after I took Grace back, the receptionist informed Nora how happy and in love we looked. Nora was about to find trouble brewing in her paradise. The local CBS station broke the news at 4 o'clock. Dr. Ethan Robinson and Nora Carter had conspired to destroy me by falsifying medical records. The nursing board put Nora on probation for 1 year later that same week. Grace transferred Nora to the graveyard shift as per policy. Nora and Ethan's relationship became rocky. It didn't help that she learned she was pregnant. Ethan began looking for other options, but quickly found he had none. He ended up working as an orderly at the Lutheran home for veterans on the graveyard shift. On the last night shift of my 4-day stretch, I walked into the station to see a congratulatory banner hung up. They had called someone in to cover my shift. Grace, her son, her parents, our captain, my parents, and my daughter were all there. I had just been promoted. I learned that my promotion had been delayed because of everything I was going through. The new position meant no more swing shifts for me. I now had a junior management role with a 5-day, 8-hour work week and weekends off. During the party, I overheard David Davis telling the captain that if fate was kind, he would soon be my father-in-law. About 2 weeks later, we appeared before Judge Allen. The terms of the settlement were approved, and my divorce was granted on the grounds of adultery. Ethan Robinson disappeared one night, leaving Nora stranded, alone, and pregnant. On Labor Day weekend, I took Grace for a walk through a local state park about an hour before dusk. I had a little thing to do, get down on one knee. Of course, she said yes. Our families had planned a Monday afternoon barbecue party at Grace's house. I had just finished grilling some franks when Grace's mother, Abigail, saw the engagement ring and ran into her daughter's arms. I was busy serving the food. When were you going to tell me? Abigail asked Grace. After we had finished eating, Grace said with a big grin. David saw his wife's eyes and asked loudly, "What's wrong?" Everybody stopped because he had gotten all of our attention. Nothing. Grace and Justin got engaged. They're getting married, Abigail said. We got married a week before Halloween. Nora is now allowed to see Lillian when she is with her parents. No one knows that my parents and I legally regained my parental rights. Nora has to live with the fact that one of her bosses is now the wife of her ex-husband. She's not a happy person. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.